Hey everybody, how's it going? So today I'd like to show you a tip that could save your customers a lot of money in the future if they wind up spilling something on their machine, or if you're doing a liquid spill damage repair, a way that you could save them from having a repair that's going to be not economically viable into the future if they do spill liquid on their computer again. So as I've mentioned in some of my older videos, Apple seems to have this obsession with putting backlight voltages like right next to CPU voltages on their connectors. You'll have a 50 volt backlight line right next to a 1.7 volt CPU data line. You have a connector that has lots of space, lots of room to space this out, and they put them right next to each other. And as I've said, this often does not result in a Linus level overclock. This results in typically a $200 to $500 trip to Rossmann repair. And the sad thing is, as I've mentioned in a more recent video, 4 years later, they are designing the machine the same way. So there's nothing learned, nothing updated. So here what I'd like to do is show you how you could save your customers from this happening. Let's say you're opening up the computer to change a battery or trackpad, just something nice that you could do if you're feeling nice that day, so that if they spill liquid on their machine, they don't wind up with no Wi-Fi. So what I'd like to do is just show you on the Flex Board View software created by Paul Daniels at pldaniels.com what I'm talking about. So this here is the Wi-Fi chip, and this here is the CPU, and this here is going to be the backlight circuit. Now, if you zoom in, this is something that very often happens on this machine. So check it out. So the fan in the computer is over here, right? So when liquid gets in here, it goes, and it usually blows it for like, right around to this area, right around the edge. When the fan blows it over here, it often gets on the backlight circuit. Now, this is backlight circuit. This is the beginning of the backlight circuit. It's not the full 39 to 50 volts. It's only 12 volts. But right next to it, you have these 4 PCI Express data lines for the 4 PCI Express data lines for Wi-Fi that do not want 12 volts. And as you can see, these are going to go straight to the CPU. So these are capacitors and inductors over here, a little filter, I imagine, that is going to be between your Wi-Fi chip and your CPU. And what winds up happening when water gets in the fan over here is it goes around here, and it goes and touches usually this test point over here, and then this slowly starts to grow corrosion of 12 volts right over to here. And once you get 12 volts to your CPU, you're not getting Wi-Fi ever again. And I could show you what that looks like on the screen over here on an actual MacBook. So this is the test point that has the 12 volts. Now, if the liquid got over here, it'd be a long way that would have to go. But you have to understand that this is Apple. We can't simply have a solder pad for the capacitor over here and then some distance between that 12 volts and the PCI Express data line. You need to have a probe point right there, like 1 effing millimeter away from the PCI Express data line going to the CPU. Because we can't simply measure on the cap over here with our multimeter probe. No, on the computer that we don't do component level repair on, that we don't allow our shops to do component level repair on, it is of utmost importance that they have probe points to make it easier to test the board that you're not allowed to fix. You have to understand why this is so triggering. The whole point of having all these probe points there is to make it easier for either an automated piece of machinery or a tech with a multimeter to be able to measure certain voltages and signals at different points in the board so that they can troubleshoot and repair it. The downside of having those probe points there is that if the liquid gets in the board in any way, or any sort of humidity, that it's more likely to corrode a pathway where this voltage is going over there, or it's more likely to allow this thing over here to short to this thing over there. So having those probe points there does make the board, in essence, less durable, but slightly easier to fix if you do board repair. Apple includes them on the board, but prohibits their AASPs from doing board repair, does not release schematics and board views, and instructs the manufacturers of chipsets for their machines to ensure that they're not sold to actual repair shops. So you get all of the downside of the device being more likely to fail, but none of the upside of it being a more repairable product, which to me makes absolutely no sense, but red fruit. So what can you do to save your customer? Well, what you could do is you could put a little bit of conformal coating just on this little probe point, because this is so common. Now, people have asked, why don't you conformal coat the whole entire board? There is a process for that. That can be a royal pain in the ass. That's something that's going to take you a good amount of time to do, and it's going to require disassembling everything. There are other complications that can result with that. It's not really something that's viable for your average small level shop. But what you could do is put the teeny tiniest bit of conformal coating right over here using some sort of conformal coat pen or anything that will make sure that if you get water in this area, even if it destroys a lot of the circuit, it can be rebuilt. So there's lots of liquid damage that can be rebuilt, but the type of liquid damage that you're not going to find economically viable to rebuild is when it sends 12 volts to the CPU. As I've explained, these CPUs cost several $100s. You don't actually know if the CPU you're getting is good because all the sources for the CPU, what they do is they rip them off donor boards. They're not new, and often those boards are donor boards because they don't work, because the CPU is dead. And it's a 45-minute to an hour-and-a-half long process to do a BGA chip swap depending on your level of proficiency in your equipment. So you're going to spend a few $100s and spend a few hours on a job, not even knowing if the part that you have is okay. That doesn't really make for an economically viable repair. So typically CPU replacement is only viable on the A1990s or the A1989s where someone wants their data back and there's no lifeboat connector and the SSD is soldered on the board and it's encrypted, where you need the machine to boot again if you're going to get the data. But for your normal few $100s here or there component level repairs, replacing the CPU is often not viable. So this is one way that you could prevent the CPU from having to be replaced by just putting a little bit of conformal coating there. Again, I sell conformal coating for those who are curious, but you can also buy conformal coating considerably cheaper from many other stores that are not located in New York City. So something like this. Again, you can find this stuff almost anywhere. This is not unique to my store. This, like this kind of green shit over here, and that you UV with a laser. There's tons of people that sell this stuff other than me where you can buy it that are probably cheaper. And it's like, as if whatever you do, there are multiple different types that you could put there, but just anything that you could put on the little probe point for the A1708 MacBook Pro will keep 12 volts from going to the CPU when there's liquid spilled on it. So let's say you do a trackpad replacement or a battery replacement or anything like that, and you do that now. If your customer spills liquid on it a year or 2 years or 3 years into the future, at that point you could actually sell them a motherboard repair for a few $100s and make some money. Whereas if the CPU died because the liquid got to that probe point, you're not going to be able to sell them a board repair that fully functions because they're not going to have Wi-Fi anymore, and that's going to keep you from making money. So putting a little bit of protection, something on this probe point over here, is going to allow you to not only protect your customer into the future, ensure that their machine is repairable, but also ensures that you're able to make some money rather than offering them a repair that they're not going to want, because who the hell wants a computer that doesn't have Wi-Fi or an Ethernet port in 2020? And as usual, I'm going to be updating my guides with this stuff. This is the guide that I have, and I am adding to it as I learn new things and as my staff bring new things to my attention. One of the rules that I have at our business now is pretty much every single time someone fixes something that's not blatantly obvious, they need to add it to a channel, and then I then format it for the wiki. The whole idea here is that all the techs at my business that have been working here for a very long time, who are very proficient at board repair, I want to take all the information out of their heads and put it into one centralized place where it's easy for everybody else to read and learn from their experience. And this is one thing that I learned from Paul at the store that I wouldn't have noticed if not for him bringing it up. It's plain as day right in front of me, but I wouldn't have seen it. So I just want to say thank you very much to Paul for making this available, and thank you to everybody that works here for making it easier for me to contribute to this wiki over here so that more and more people can learn how to do board repair, learn what the issues are with all these model machines. As I always say, I believe in right to repair, but with every right comes a responsibility, and that responsibility is to educate the public as well as the people in our industry so that they are better fit to do repairs on these products. If I'm advocating that we should be able to repair them, then I should also be advocating that people have the information necessary to be able to do those repairs. And I hope that you all will be able to contribute and help me with this wiki as you learn things that I don't know, that I don't have listed over the course of your own board repairs. Thank you for watching, and as always, BlackBerry hopes that you learned something.